Sathyabama Institute of Science and Technology.
A very good day, everyone. Myself, Preetha Wilma Dawson, Assistant Professor, College of Physiotherapy, Sathyabama Institute of Science and Technology, deemed to be a university. In today's session, we are going to learn about the most important topic, visual pathway. Visual pathway is also known as optic pathway. This pathway starts from retina. The light enters the retina after traversing through cornea, lens, and vitreous humour, which is the intraocular fluid. Retina has 10 layers in it, as you can see in this picture. The light ray will be passing through all the layers of retina in order to reach the layers of rods and cones. After reaching the layers of rods and cones, the excess amount of light will be absorbed by the layer which is called as pigment layer. Now let's start to discuss about the structures of visual pathway. First, we learn about retina. Retina is a photosensitive inner layer of the human eyeball. It contains photoreceptors in it. To learn about photoreceptors, you can look for the previous video on visual processing. Retina is a structure which converts light energy, which is in the form of electromagnetic radiation, into electrical impulses. Next comes the optic nerve. The optic nerve constitutes the fibers of ganglion cells. The optic nerve leaves the eyeball at the optic disc. This optic disc is also known as blind spot and enters the cranium from the posterior part of the orbit. The point which we are going to discuss now is a very important point. The fibers from the temporal part of retina will be carrying impulse from the nasal field of the same eye. So it happens in vice versa manner. So let us consider the fibers from the nasal part of retina will be carrying impulses from the temporal field of the same eye. As we discussed about optic nerve, this optic nerve will be exiting the eye in the part called optic disc, which is also known as blind spot. After that, it will be leaving the posterior part of the orbit and will be entering into the cranium. Now, let us discuss about optic chiasma. So, this optic chiasma is formed by the crossing of the medial fibers of the optic nerve. That is, the medial fibers of both the optic nerve will be crossing in order to form the optic chiasma. So, we have the crossed medial fibers and the uncrossed lateral fibers. These two fibers will combine to form a structure which is called as optic tract. So next comes the optic tract. The optic tract consists of one half of ipsilateral fibers and the other half of contralateral fibers. Ipsilateral fibers are the fibers from the same side and contralateral fibers are the fibers from the opposite side. So next, the fibers from there, it will be running backwards and towards the cerebral pentacle. And from there, it will be turning around and it will reach a nucleus which is called as lateral geniculate nucleus, LGN. The next structure which we are going to discuss about is lateral geniculate nucleus. This forms the subcortical relay center for visual impulse and it is a part of thalamus. So, the next order of fibers arising from this lateral geniculate nucleus, so it is called as geniculocalcarine or optic radiation. This lateral geniculate nucleus is divided into 6 layers of cell. So, we have the ipsilateral fibers of the optic tract. So, this ipsilateral fibers will be terminating in the second, third and the fifth layer of lateral geniculate nucleus, and the contralateral fibers of the optic tract will be terminating in the first, fourth and the sixth layer of lateral geniculate nucleus. So next we'll talk about optic radiation. Some fibers from the lateral geniculate nucleus will be going to the specific area of midbrain which is called as superior colliculus and pretectal nucleus. And most of the fibers from the lateral geniculate nucleus will be getting divided into 2 fibers. The first fiber is called as superior retinal fibers. These fibers will be running via parietal lobe and from there it will be reaching the occipital lobe. And next we have the inferior retinal fibers. This fiber will be running via temporal lobe and reaches the occipital lobe. So now we have the image of lateral geniculate nucleus. So you can see here the superior colliculus is present here. Anterior to it we have the pretectal nucleus. So now let's discuss about visual pathway. In eye we have two fields, the nasal field and the temporal field. So the field which is near to the nose is called as nasal field, and the field which is away from the nose is called as temporal field. So here this is the nasal field and this is the temporal field. This is the nasal field here and this is the temporal field. As we discussed before, the impulses from the temporal field is always carried to the nasal part of the retina, and the impulses from the nasal field is always carried to the temporal part of the retina. Same thing happens here. So we have optic nerve. In optic nerve there are two fibers, the medial fiber and the lateral fiber. So the medial fiber is a crossed fiber, whereas the lateral fiber is an uncrossed fiber. So this medial fiber crossing is called as optic chiasma. Let us consider the extreme corner of the right eye, this part, as the right side, and the extreme corner of the left side, this part, is considered as left side. When this is right and this tends to become left. When this is left, this tends to become right. So let us have one thing. When the fibers from the right side will always be going to the right side. So the fibers from the left side will be always going to the left side. So here also the fibers from the left side will be always going to the left side. The fibers from the right side will always going to the right side. And after crossing, we have this optic tract. This optic tract is formed by one half of ipsilateral fiber and the other half of contralateral fiber. Same things happens here also. Some fibers of the optic tract will be going to the lateral geniculate nucleus, and there we have a structure called superior colliculus and pretectal nucleus, and most of the fibers will be going to the occipital lobe. So in order to reach the occipital lobe, some fibers has to bypass the structure called parietal lobe. So the structure which is passing via the parietal lobe is called as Baum's loop, and the fibers which are passing via the temporal lobe is called as Meyer's loop. So these two loops together is called as loops of optic radiation. Now let's have a quick recap for today's session. So first we discussed about what is visual pathway. This visual pathway is also known as optic pathway. Next we'll discuss about retina. So retina is a light sensitive structure. It contains 10 layers. So the most important layer in retina is the layer of rods and cones. Next is about optic nerve and its pathway. So we learned about visual fields. There are two visual fields. One is nasal and the other one is temporal. Then we discussed about optic chiasma. Optic chiasma is a crossing of the medial fibers from the optic nerve. So next about optic tract. Optic tract consists of one half of ipsilateral fibers and the other half of contralateral fibers from the optic nerve. So after optic nerve, the impulses will be carried to the lateral geniculate nucleus. In lateral geniculate nucleus, it will be going to the two structures that are superior colliculus, and the other structure is called as pretectal nucleus. And the most of the fibers will be going to the other structures in the occipital lobe via the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe. Thank you.